Graceland, the estate of legendary singer Elvis Presley, is facing a legal battle now over a potential foreclosure sale.
For nearly half a century, no one was allowed to enter the attic of Elvis Presley's Graceland. Even family members respected the invisible line that guarded the upper floor. But in 2025, everything changed. With Elvis's granddaughter, Riley Keough, now overseeing the estate, the attic was finally unsealed. What they discovered inside was not just memorabilia. It was a hidden window into Elvis's soul. Who arranged the space? Why was it kept locked for so long? And what did it reveal about the man behind the legend, the global icon known simply as the King? This isn't just a story about forgotten belongings. It's about grief, legacy, and the parts of Elvis Presley the world was never meant to see. A kingdom and a fortress. In 1957, Elvis Presley was just 22 years old when he bought the house that would become one of the most iconic homes in American history. Located in Memphis, Tennessee, the white-columned mansion known as Graceland cost him $102,500, a significant sum at the time, but priceless in terms of legacy. Elvis didn't rename it. He liked the name Graceland just as it was. At first, it was a place to escape the madness of fame. But over time, it became something far greater, a symbol of who he was both in life and in death. The estate stretched across more than 13 acres and featured barns, stables, rolling pastures, and later, rooms that ranged from the meditative to the bizarre. Elvis filled it with life and character, including a pet chimpanzee named Scatter, who wore clothes, caused mischief, and mirrored Elvis's own unpredictable spirit. By the mid-1960s, as Beatlemania rose and cultural tides shifted, Elvis created a quiet corner for himself on the property, a meditation garden. He would retreat there for peace, reflection, and spiritual grounding. But even as Graceland reflected his inner life, it was also transformed into a fortress. After his death on August 16, 1977, everything changed. The mansion became a shrine, and the second floor, including Elvis's bedroom, bathroom, and the attic, was sealed off. Out of respect, they said, for privacy, for dignity.
He and I spent a lot of time together. Upstairs, the upper part of Graceland is basically his room and my room, so.
But as decades passed and Graceland opened to the public, the areas that remained off-limits only deepened the mystery. What's still hidden behind those walls? And more importantly, why had no one gone back up? A secret finally revealed. For nearly 5 decades, the attic at Graceland remained untouched. It wasn't just closed. It was sealed by family tradition, emotional weight, and a quiet agreement that some parts of Elvis's world were not meant to be disturbed. Even as Graceland became a museum, drawing in millions of fans over the years, the attic door stayed locked. Tour guides always gave the same answer. The upstairs is private, out of respect for the family. But over time, curiosity only grew. What could be so personal, so sacred, that not even world leaders or Hollywood royalty were allowed to see it? The answer finally came in early 2025. After the tragic passing of Lisa Marie Presley in 2023, her daughter, Riley Keough, inherited full control of the Graceland estate.
We have to sell Graceland. And I just looked at him and I said, that will never happen.
And in a quiet, unannounced decision, she chose to authorize a professional team of archivists to document the contents of the sealed attic. There were no news cameras, no fanfare, just a team of experts with white gloves, notebooks, and a sense of reverence for what they were about to uncover. On a cold January morning, they climbed the narrow stairs and turned the old brass key that had remained in the Presley family since 1977. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. What they saw wasn't a dusty storage room. It was something more intimate, a time capsule frozen in place. The space was surprisingly large, spanning the entire top floor. Thick curtains blocked sunlight from dormer windows, and a small air conditioning unit hummed quietly in the corner. Somehow, the unit had remained operational all these years, maintained by Graceland's staff without ever entering the room. Lining the walls were neatly stacked boxes, labeled in Elvis's own handwriting. Some names were nostalgic: Tupelo, Army Days, Vegas. But one label stood out. A single box marked simply "After," dated 1977. And that's when everyone knew this attic wasn't just storage. It was a message. Childhood memories and private wounds. As the archivist began to sort through the carefully labeled boxes in the Graceland attic, it became clear this wasn't a collection of forgotten junk. It was Elvis's private archive, a deeply personal timeline that only he, and perhaps a few trusted family members, ever truly understood. The items found inside were heartbreakingly human. They didn't celebrate stardom. They exposed vulnerability. In a box marked Tupelo 1945, they found a small battered teddy bear missing one eye. It was covered in handmade patches, sewn from floral fabric. Family records confirmed what it was: Elvis's childhood companion, nicknamed Bear. His mother, Gladys, had sewn the patches using scraps from her own dresses during one of the hardest times of their lives. When Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, was jailed for writing bad checks, Gladys and young Elvis were left with almost nothing. Bear was more than a toy. It was a source of comfort during nights filled with uncertainty. Another box, labeled Army Days, held a tattered Bible. The spine was reinforced with electrical tape, and inside the front cover, Gladys had written a note telling her son to stay strong in faith. Elvis had underlined dozens of passages, jotted notes in the margins, and marked verses that clearly meant something to him. One of the last verses he highlighted, Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd," dated just days before his death in 1977. Perhaps the most poignant item was a leather-bound yearbook from Hume's High School. Elvis had always been shy and often mocked for his clothes and Southern drawl. But this yearbook told a different story. Dozens of classmates had signed it with notes of support. "Don't stop singing," one message read. "You're going to go far." These attic discoveries told a different Elvis story. Not of the king of rock and roll, but of a lonely boy with big dreams, a fragile heart, and a mother he never stopped missing. Whispers from the attic. Beyond the memories and personal artifacts, the Graceland attic held something even more revealing. The inner creative life of Elvis Presley in his boxes was a stack of reel-to-reel tapes, marked simply in Elvis's handwriting. Practice sessions, 1976. These were not polished studio recordings. They were raw, experimental, and deeply intimate. Elvis was alone on most of the tracks, playing with gospel harmonies, blending blues riffs, and even testing early electronic effects. It was clear he was still chasing something. Not perfection, but freedom. Then came the tape that stunned everyone, a stripped-down version of Unchained Melody. No piano, no backing band, just Elvis's voice, wavering but full of emotion. It wasn't the sound of a man performing. It was the sound of a man searching. One expert later described it as a farewell whispered into the dark. The vulnerability in his voice was haunting and unforgettable. Also found were hundreds of pages of handwritten lyrics, many of them scribbled on hotel notepads, diner napkins, and worn notebook paper. Some were alternate verses to famous songs like Suspicious Minds. Others were short poems and fragments of ideas, half-formed and deeply personal. One note scrawled in a hotel's stationery simply read, "Lights down, voices gone, but I still hear them calling me." Among the most heartbreaking discoveries was a pile of unopened fan letters. Some were from soldiers stationed overseas, others from grieving families, thanking Elvis for getting them through hard times. One, postmarked just months before his death, begged him to slow down and take care of his health. The letter had never been opened. Maybe he never saw it. Maybe he couldn't bear to read it. Together, they painted a portrait of a man struggling to hold on to his music, his identity, and his place in the world. Even in silence, Elvis was still trying to be heard. The final twist. As archivists continued their careful examination of Elvis's attic, what began as a cataloging of history took a bizarre and unsettling turn. Tucked into the far corner of the space, away from the neatly labeled boxes and personal artifacts, they found unexpected evidence, signs that someone had been living there. A worn cot, an ashtray filled with cigarette butts. A faded chair was positioned beside a small radio, still tuned to a gospel station. It was not just a shrine. It had been a hiding place. The attic, sealed since August 1977, had somehow sheltered more than just Elvis's belongings. Maintenance records showed the air conditioning unit had been consistently running for decades, serviced regularly from the outside, but never switched off and never questioned. Had Elvis himself used the attic as a final retreat in his last days? Or had someone else stayed there after his death, quietly hidden behind the veil of Graceland's mythology?
All day long,
Yes.
people going, through the house. And there's just this sort of love that just doesn't stop.
Riley Keough and the Presley estate have made no public comment about the discovery. What's known is limited. Vague references to a living presence, and the archivist's confirmation that the area had been occupied far more recently than anyone expected. Whether it was a staff member, a distant relative, or something even more mysterious remains unclear. What they found didn't just reshape our view of Elvis, it redefined fame, legacy, and memory. The attic wasn't just storage, it was a reflection of the man behind the music. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen for more untold celebrity secrets.